Hello, this is LewPhan. In this video, I'll be showing you how to make the StA-11 submachine gun in paper. So, as you can see, this is the finished result. You can remove the magazine, you can prime the gun, the stock is fitted to fit your shoulder, and it has an iron sight. So this is just a close-up of it. Within this video there's a small bit that didn't record properly, so I had to remove it, and I'll tell you what I did within that few minutes when it comes up. It's about halfway through. So you'll need some paper, and quite a lot of it. You'll need a pencil, a ruler, scissors, and tape. So you're going to start off by rolling up a thin paper tube. I refer to this paper tube as tube 1. So tape up tube 1 so it's very secure and doesn't come undone. Once it's fully taped, get another piece of paper and then roll it around tube 1. Make sure though that you don't stick this piece of paper onto tube 1. The finished result will be, I'll refer to the finished result as tube 2. It's important that tube 1 can slide freely inside tube 2, but it is quite a tight fit. This is going to be the gun's barrel. Just like the previous tube, make sure it's taped up so it doesn't come undone. So tube 1 should be able to move freely, but make sure it's tight and so it doesn't just roll out. Make sure it isn't too tight that you can't move it. So we get another piece of paper and once again roll it around tube 1 without sticking it to tube 1. This should make another roll of paper the same size as tube 2. I refer to this tube as tube 3. Tape it up securely. This tutorial will be quite hard compared to the other ones because there's a lot of fiddly bits inside it that I don't really know how to explain. Next, get another piece of paper, and this piece of paper is going to be tube 4. Tube 4 has to be more bigger than all the other tubes, but not too big. In the gun, this tube will be in the middle, so it makes the gun a more rounded shape and less squarey or blockish. So make sure it isn't too big compared to the ones. Make sure it isn't too small either. It should only be just a bit more bigger, so the other two tubes can only just fit inside it. Now arrange them all so that tube 2 with tube 1 inside is at the bottom, tube 4 is in the middle, and tube 3 is on the top. Once you've done that, take them together within this formation. Tube 1 should be protruding from tube 2 a bit, and this will be the barrel. The end with tube 1 protruding from it is the front. The end that is just straight down, that is the back. Once you've taped it in secure so that all of the tubes are straight, get another piece of paper and stick it to the tubes. Doesn't matter which tube you start sticking this one from. Just make sure that it is attached at either end. Next, roll the paper around all of the tubes. This should make them all look nice and neat and as if they're one giant tube. I refer to this structure as the gun. Now get another piece of paper and draw a dot 10 centimeters in. Then on the other side, draw another dot 10 centimeters in. Join the two dots up with a line and then cut it out so you have a small rectangle. Wrap it around the gun, but make sure it is not stuck to the gun. It's important that it can move loosely, as this will be the priming mechanism. I'll refer to this tube as A. As you can see, it should easily be able to slide around. It should easily be able to slide on the gun. With a pencil, shade in one of the sides. Make sure that as much of the side is shaded in as possible. This will make the gun look more 3D, as the inside should be more darker shaded than the outside. As you can see from the previous gun, it's shaded in and has lots of rectangles and squares all over it. This just adds to it and makes it look less plain and boring. I've put these shapes on with a pen onto it so that it stands out a bit more. As you can see, it doesn't take up all of the side, but it takes up a large proportion of it. Make sure that it goes to either end. It should still be able to slide easily. Next, draw a rectangle about halfway in, or about 2/3 away from the back, so a third in from the front. Doesn't really matter about whereabouts it is, but just make sure it's towards that it's within the front half of the gun. This is going to be the area that you see in the priming mechanism. As you can see in the previous model, that is the square that I shaded in. I drew a bullet shape inside it, so when you cock it back, it looks as if a bullet is sliding into the chamber of the gun. I'm just going over it in pen to make it stand out a bit more. So A should be able to slide over this the bullet shape. Next, get another piece of paper and stick it onto the gun. Make sure that it's only stuck to the gun on the very edges and that it's not stuck to A or its surroundings. Once you've done this, loosely roll it around the gun. Make sure it's not too tight, otherwise A will not be able to move under. When sticking it on, don't stick it on too tightly and don't completely cover the top in tape. Draw a shape where you think the bullet shape will be, and then try cutting it out. Make sure not to ruin the rest of the gun, and that make sure that you only cut through the layer you've just wrapped round. Doesn't really matter though about it being so neat, because there will be another layer wrapped around this one. Try to cut out a rectangle the same size and on where the other rectangle you drew that was under A. Carry on cutting as well up to the very top of the gun, as you'll see in a second, so that you're able to pull back A. When pulling backwards and forth A, you should be able to see the bullet shape you've done. as you can see from there. If you don't fully understand, just carry on watching and then you should see it later on. Get a bit of scrap paper and roll it up into a tight cylinder. This is going to be the handle for the prime. Securely stick the handle onto A. Make sure it's at the top of the gun. The top of the gun is at the bit where tube 1 is at the bottom, as you can see. Make sure it's very thoroughly stuck on, as if this comes off then it could ruin the gun. Make sure it's not too high either, and if it is then just trim off the handle. Just trim off half the handle, so there's still a considerable bit left on, so you can pull it back with your finger. As you can see, I'm just cutting off part of the lever so it's not too high. When you pull back the lever, then A should pull back with it, revealing the rectangle with the bullet drawing inside. This whole area we have cut out and the lever I'll call B. Get a piece of paper and roll it up vertically. Make sure that it's about the same size as roll 1 and roll 3. No, as roll 2 and roll 3. And make sure that there's enough room inside it for another small tube to be able to move inside. This is going to hold the magazine into place. Cut both the edges off at an angle, so it looks kind of like a boat shape. And I stick this on just below tube 1 that is inside tube 2, but make sure that it is towards the back of the gun. At the back of the gun, all 4 tubes, or all 5 if including tube 1, should all be lined up. I'll call this 5th tube, tube 5. Just like you did with the other 2 rolls of paper, stick a roll of paper on the gun so you can roll it round again. Make sure that it's not stuck on when you roll it, make sure it's not rolled too tightly. But don't roll it until I begin rolling. Ever so often, keep on priming your gun just to make sure that it doesn't get too tight so that it can't move. When you roll it over once. Cut 2 insertions so that when you roll over the paper it doesn't interfere with B. Stick the other 2 larger parts of the roll of paper around. This should just neaten it all up, make it look a lot more better. Then cut off the rectangle that's just sticking out. You should now be left with a square-like rectangle where all of the priming mechanisms are, including the handle and the gun shape and A. Just to recap, this is called B. Keep on checking to make sure that A does not get stuck. If it does get stuck, then remove parts that you've done so that it loosens off the gun. Next, cut off a small rectangle. This rectangle is going to be between the lever that primes the gun and the rectangle where the gun drawing is seen. This should split B into 2 separate parts. Remove the bits of the roll that goes over the gap between roll 5 and the front. Then stick it down to make it look nice and neat. This bit is quite hard to explain, but it should look something like as follows. Also, cut to the end bit just there, so that it's at a diagonal angle, just like you cut roll 5. As you can see, it's now beginning to take shape. This is the main body of the gun. Shade in the whole of the gun and draw illustrations on it to match what the gun looks like in real life. As you can see, the lever should be able to pull back A still to reveal the priming mechanism, to reveal the chamber even. Next, on a scrap piece of paper, cut out 2 rectangles, both with a curved top and a large dot towards the top. This is going to be the front iron sight. The 2 cut out shapes should look something like this. Stick the 2 shapes towards the top front of the gun. They should be sticking up above the gun in line with the handle for the prime. They should both be sticking up vertical, as you'll see in a minute. The front iron sight may be of little use because of the handle that primes the gun. If you want to avoid this, then either cut down the handle to make the handle more smaller, or emphasize the front iron sight size. Next, draw and cut out the two shapes I have illustrated. This is going to be the rear iron sight. One of them should have a rectangle coming from it. Fold that over. That's going to go over the back so that it makes it more of a 3D shape. Stick the two bits that you've cut out onto the back of the gun, or top back of the gun. Make sure that it sticks up above the rest of the gun, just like the handle and the front iron sight. The rectangle that you folded over should stick onto the back of the other part of the front iron of the back iron sight. You can then cut out a small rectangle shape so that you can see through the back iron sight. If you don't understand this bit, it's not majorly important, and you can just make up any iron sight really. So it should look something like this. Next, get out another piece of paper. Once again, roll it up vertically, but make sure that this tube is really large. This is going to be the handle. Cut it off at an odd angle and cut off the bottom half at another odd angle to match. I have rounded off the bottom part just to make it look a bit more better on mine. And this is not a necessity. Once you've done that, stick the handle onto the back of the gun. This will give you something to hold when holding the gun. Squish down the tube so it's more of a flat and squish tube. This should be roughly the same size as the gun magazine. Right now I am folding over the piece of paper and drawing a nice thin triangle. When I cut this out, I then should have two triangles stuck to each other to make a larger triangle. I'll stick each side of this triangle on the top back of the handle, as you can see. This makes the handle have more character. And something similar is also on the gun. This and the following few things aren't necessary and they can be skipped, but it just makes the gun look more realistic. The next thing is the trigger. For this you'll need to cut out a rounded rectangle shape and then cut out the inside of the rounded rectangle shape. It's the same shape that the whole thing is cut out, but it's a little more smaller. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Right there. So it's so it's like a metal ring around the trigger. I'll also cut out a small like little triangle thing for the actual trigger itself. So stick it on just in front of the handle, towards the back of the gun. It should look something like as you'll see. If you don't fully understand what it should look like, just search up a picture of the StA-11 on the internet, on Google Images. Stick the trigger inside the trigger guard. Next, cut out two other rectangles that curve off at the top. They look kind of like the front iron sights, but they curve off a lot more gradually to make it more like, so it looks more like a square with a triangle on top. And then draw a dot with a pencil in the middle. Stick these two to the front of the trigger at either side of the trigger. This should strengthen the trigger guard so that it doesn't like flop about. As you can see, that is the magazine. When I was doing the magazine, the camera like glitched and it was all fuzzy and you couldn't really see anything. So I'll just tell you what I did. I just rolled it up like a largish tube, just like the other one, and I made it an appropriate size, so it's from the end. So it's from the end of the stuff we've just done, right the way through to about 3 or 4 centimeters. 3 or 4 centimeters past the front of the gun, but not past tube 1. You may not understand what I mean, but once again, if you just look at the picture of the gun, then you'll understand that the magazine does not end where the gun ends, and it ends just before the barrel, but just after the rest of the gun. And also cut out a ring of paper and stick it towards one of the sides. Then get another smaller piece of paper and roll it around the front. As you can see, this adds a bit more character and makes the front bit a bit more larger. As you can see also, it doesn't finish where the rest of the gun finishes. It finishes in between the front of the gun and the front of the barrel. Next, cut out a small piece of paper and roll it up into a tube. This tube should be big enough to fit inside tube 5. Stick it onto the magazine in the appropriate place so that when you slot it in, it slides. When it slides to the back, it looks something like this. The back of the magazine should slide right the way up just before the trigger. There shouldn't be very much of a gap in between. Line this up before sticking on the tube that slides within tube 5. Get a large rectangle and then stick it onto the front of the barrel. Then roll it around the barrel to make the very front of the barrel a bit more larger. Leave the barrel or tube 1 sticking out of tube 2, so that half of the front half is more thicker than the second half. But make sure that the whole front of the barrel is not completely wrapped around, and only half of it is. The front of the magazine should come up to the stage where the barrel thickens up. It's quite hard to explain, so it's a lot more easier if you have a picture of the gun. Roll up a little tube, and this little tube will stick on the front of the magazine, so that it looks as if the magazine actually sticks onto the gun in 2 places when it only sticks onto the gun in 1. This makes the gun more accurate to the actual gun. As you can see, just mark with a pencil where the gun ends, and then here stick on the little tube. Make sure that the tube is stuck on just before this spot, so when you put them up it looks like that. Now we're going to do the stock of the gun. First, roll a piece of paper into a tube. This tube should be the same size as tube 5, tube 2, and tube 3. It doesn't have to be the exact same size, but the more similar these tubes are, the more better the gun looks. Tape the tube up and make sure that it's secure. There's no need for the tube to have to slot in to any of the other tubes, because it's going to stick onto another tube that attaches it to the rest of the gun. Right here I'm rolling up another tube and I'm making it as thick as the gun is. And then I'm also going to make it as long as the back of the gun is high. This will make it appear as if the stock can fold in. It can't actually fold in because that will make the stock incredibly weak. It's quite easy to make it fold in, but yeah, it makes it weak so that if you ever push it against your shoulder, it'll just bend in and will break. Make another tube and make this tube small but fatter than the other tube. This tube is going to slot into the middle of that tube. It should be roughly about twice as long as the tube you've just done for the stock is thick. Roll up another tube the same size and the same width as the first tube you've just rolled. The tube should be of equal size and look almost identical. They don't have to look exactly identical. Roll another tube, but this time, once you've taped it all up and everything, you're going to want to cut the tube so that it's more short than the rest. You'll see the appropriate height in a minute. It should be around 9 centimeters long. Now you're going to want to stick them all together. So start off by sticking the top tube or the bottom tube, the top and the bottom tube, to the tube with the fatter tube right around it. Cut the bottom tube at an angle where it sticks onto the tube that touches it all together, so that it goes at a more lower angle, so that it looks more like the actual gun stock. So stick on the one that hasn't been cut straight on. This should be quite straight and perpendicular to the tube with the fatter tube around it, so that when you stick it onto the gun, it is in a straight line with the rest of the gun. The other tube should be at an odd angle, and it should line up to the little tube you've just done. Make sure that when you stick the little tube to join up the two longer tubes, there's quite a bit of space. There's quite a bit of tube left on the other two longer tubes, as you can see. So as you can see, the two longer tubes have quite a bit of extra tube left after the small tube that joins them up. Leave this there, as we're going to use this so that it fits the shoulder more better. Make sure that the two longer tubes are also of equal length at the end, so they both line up. Then next, get another piece of paper and keep on folding it up. Don't roll it up, because this one has to be completely flat, so just keep on folding it and then folding it over and folding it over. This makes it a bit more comfortable and padded. Also makes it more stronger so that you can bend it more easily. Once you've done this, tape it up as you would a normal tube. make folds all the way along this flat piece of paper, this flat piece of folded paper, so that it can be bent easily. It should be quite considerably longer than the distance it needs to be stuck in between, so that it can be folded down into a more curved shape. As you can see, it has to curve down like that, so cut off any excess once you've made that shape. Lots of folds you should have done in this flat piece of paper should make it more easily malleable into the crescent shape you need. And then stick it onto the ends of each of the longer tubes of the stock. As you can see, you should now make a crescent shape that fits the shoulder line. This means that when you're holding up to your shoulder, it should fit more better. It doesn't have to be very strong, because the other smaller tube should hold it together. If you want, you can get a bit of tape and then tape the base of the crescent to the tube that connects the two longer tubes. This should make it a bit more stronger, so the crescent doesn't move. Stick the smaller side, the side where it narrows off, onto the rear of the gun, as you have just seen. The gun should now look like this. This is the bit that I didn't do before. I've redone this bit. I'm not going to be able to edit this in where it should have been, because, well, I did it like quite after, and it'll probably ruin the audio. And it took an hour to do this audio, and I don't really want to ruin it. So if you didn't really understand how to do it, then just watch this bit here. If you follow the entire tutorial all the way through, then well done, because it's quite hard to tutorial. I've not really worded it very well because I didn't really know what to say through a lot of it. I didn't really know how to explain a lot of it, so yeah, it's quite hard, this one. I've done a lot of other tutorials and a lot of other videos that are a lot more easier in comparison to it. So you can check them out on my channel. I've not done very many gun tutorials. I've done a lot of blade tutorials because with the blade I could keep on just editing it, and it was quite easy to do, and I found it quite fun to do it. Whilst the guns take a lot more longer to do. They're also, in my opinion, they're not as rewarding because they don't like move. You can't really interact with them as much, but they do look a lot more better, I suppose. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.